students. With this session, let us start with the discussion on the module 2, which includes the data collection and the inventories. So in the previous module, we discussed on what is the reason for urbanization, and because of the urbanization, what is the problem that we are facing in the urban region, and how the problems can be solved with the help of urban transportation planning, and what all the various stages and the process involved in the urban transportation planning were all discussed in the previous module. So now in this module 2, we will be going to discuss on for a successful transportation planning, or any planning has to be done, we should have the sufficient data with us. So some of the data which is essential for the transportation planning and how to collect those data will be discussed under this module. So now in the chapter, it includes, we will be understanding what all the different types of travel movements that are there in the urban region, and we will be discussing on how to decide the study area and what all the various types of transportation planning survey which will be conducted, which the data what we get out of it will be helpful in the transportation planning will be studied under this particular module. Along with us, we will be covering the topic on the road inventories. The various inventories that we collect while transportation planning will be discussed under this module. So now first we have to define our study area. So what is the study area? So study area is nothing but the place where the transportation planning will be done, and where we are planning to do the implementation work. And also study area refers to the place where the transportation surveys are being done. Okay, so now before starting our transportation planning, we have to define our study area. For example, I am improving I have one particular region. Let us take like as a Bangalore city. So now in the Bangalore city where the implementation work is going on. So if you are improving the entire transportation network of the Bangalore city, so the Bangalore city will be our study area. Or if you are improving road networks in one particular area, say Vijayanagar, so the Vijayanagar will be the study area. So study area it is nothing but the place where our transportation planning surveys are being planned. That we call it as the study area. And now the study area, when we consider, that should consist of all the places which have already been developed and the areas which is likely to develop in the nearest future. For example, when you are planning for the transportation network for the Bangalore city, so now we are saying the Bangalore is expanding every year. So after 2-3 years, the Bangalore may reach to the certain extent. Okay, so the boundary of the Bangalore city may expand. So now here, when the study area is considered, we need to consider all the region where the development has already done, and those region where development it is likely to develop in the near future. That need to be considered when we define the study area. So now, and also the area, the imaginary line or the boundary which represents the study area, we call that as the external cordon line. So it's an external cordon line. So I have considered the study area. So the line which defines the study area or the boundary of the study area, we can call it as the external cordon line. It will be usually an imaginary line. So now if you take the Bangalore city as an study area, so this particular line, the outer line or the imaginary line, that will represent the external cordon line. So now when we consider the external cordon line, we have to keep some of the points in mind how to consider this external cordon line, which will accurately define the study area. So now some of the points that need to be considered in the external cordon lines, which includes, so the external cordon line should consist of all the area which is already built up or developed during the period of study. So that need to be there, and also the areas which are likely to be built up in the nearest future. The second condition is all areas are oriented towards the city center. So now when we take the Bangalore city, our city center will be the Majestic. So now to the Majestic, the people may come from the various point. So now when we consider these external cordon line, so each and every point from where the people are moving towards the city center, that need to be included within the external cordon line. And thirdly, external cordon line should be continuous and uniform. So maybe it should not have maybe it won't be having any particular geometric pattern, but the thing is the line should be continuous. If you start at one point, when you traverse across the external cordon line, you will come back to the same point once again. So that says that the external cordon lines are continuous. So uniforms, it will preferably follow some of the geometric shape, either the circular, radial, rectangular, grid shape. So it should have some geometrical shape. And at last, so the what external cordon line we have considered, that should be compatible with the previous studies of the area and also the studies which have been planned in the future. So when we make our area compatible with the previous studies, for example, we can divide the area, maybe the area will be divided based upon the electoral polls, or the area will be divided based upon the water supply system, or we can divide it with respect to the telephone sector. So now when we make the study area compatible with the previous studies, we can combine some of the data, so that the data which have been already collected from the previous study, that can be utilized and we can make it useful for our transportation planning survey. And also it should be compatible with the future study. So it is very much essential, so that we can combine the data and we can reuse it and modify the data what we have, and that can be helpful in the transportation planning survey. So these are some of the points which has to be considered while defining the external cordon line. So it's one of the important question in examination point of view. So usually they'll ask, define an external cordon line and explain the factors considered in defining the external cordon line. And we now understand what is an external cordon line and what is a study area. So next we have one terminology called the zonings. So now we have defined a study area. So study the outer line representing the studied area, we call that as an external cordon line. So now when the area is too big and we want to conduct the transportation survey, for example, it is decided to improve the network in the Bangalore city, entire Bangalore city. So now the study area will be the Bangalore city, and what data we have to collect, that should be from the entire Bangalore city. But the thing is, Bangalore is so big and collecting the data at one single stretch will be very difficult. So yes, of course we can collect, but we require a lot of resources in terms of the human resources, or in terms of other budget requirements will be very, very huge. So now when we have the study area is very large, and when it is not possible for you to collect the data, and as and when the study area become large, the data collection will be tedious, and also after collecting the data, analysis of the large amount of data will also be very much troublesome. So to make it easy, to make our data collection easy and convenient, we will be dividing the entire study area into the smaller areas, that we call it as the zones. So zones are nothing but the dividing the study area into the smaller areas, that we call it as the zone. And how the zones will be done, how the zoning will be done. In the previous module, we have studied the entire urban region will be classified based upon the land use characteristic. Residential area, one group; commercial area, one group; the area where the transportation facilities are provided, that is considered as the other category or land use pattern. So now when the zonings are done, so we have to consider that should represent spatial representation of the land use. All the area where we have residential buildings, that is considered as the one zone. All the area where we have commercial establishment, zone 2. All the areas where we have industrial establishment, zone 3, or where we have the educational industry or educational institution, zone 4. So like that, when we divide the entire area into zones, so we have to consider the land use and also the economic factors which will likely to influence the travel zones. So with respect to the zones, we have two terminology. One is the internal zone and the external zone. So we have so the area surrounding the study area, we call it as the external cordon line. I'm repeating again, the imaginary line surrounding the study area is an external cordon line. So all the area which is inside the external cordon line, we call that as the internal zone, and all those area which is outside the external cordon line, that we call it as the external zones. So now the entire area is divided into the zones. So now when we collect the data, usually there will be, after collecting the data, when we analyze, we will have the confusions, especially when we are handling with the too many data. When the amount of data what we have collected is too large, the confusion is likely to occur. So which data what we have collected belongs to which zone. So to avoid such confusion, we follow some of the coding practices. Okay, so coding practices is when giving these zones one particular name. So likewise, as and how we have the names for each and every zone. So when we do the coding practices, the zones will be given the particular numbers. Okay, so now one such coding practices includes dividing entire study area into sector first. So usually we will divide the study area into sectors when the study area is too large. If I mean to say that we have the study area is divided into the sector for various sectors, and then the sectors will be subdivided into the zones. And if it is required, if still the study area is very large, the zones will be divided into the still the smaller area, and that we call it as the subzone. So now here, so this will lead to the confusion. So usually when the data is collected, first we will collect the data from the subzone, and what data we have collected in the subzone, that will be integrated, and which will gives you the characteristics of that particular zone. So and then the data collected from the all the zones will be segregated, which will represent the characteristics of that particular sector. Then the characteristics of all the sectors will be segregated, which will gives you the idea about the information related to the entire study area. So now when we are handling the data, it will lead to the confusion. So from where the data is collected, which sector it belongs to, which zone it belongs to. So when the studies are conducted, we will follow the coding practices. So when the study area is divided into the sector, each sector will be given the number from 0 to entire study area will be divided into the sector, 9 sectors, and which is given the number from 0 to 8. Okay, so like 1, 2, 3, so we need to give the numberings from 1 to 8. Starting from, so now the number 0 has to be always given to the center sector. Coding 9 will be given to the external zones. And next, when you divide the zones into the sectors into the zones, once again it will be divided into the 10 zone starting from 0 to 9. So usually when we give the number, we will follow it in the clockwise manner. And then the subzones are divided into, again zones are divided into 10 subzones. The coding will be also 0 to 9. So now when we have the three digit number 4349. So when we have this will represent a 3-digit number represents a subzone, which will belongs to the subzone 9 and the zone 4 and the sector 3. Okay, or if the study area is small, we can neglect this into the sector. You can just divide the area into the zones and subzone. Thus a 2-digit number bearing 73 will belongs to the zone 3 and the subzone 3 and zone 7. So this is how the coding practicing will be done, and which will be useful while collecting the information. So likewise, how we consider some of the point factors while considering the external cordon line, we do have some important factors that need to be considered while dividing the study area into the zones. which includes the land use is the most important factors in establishing the zone for transportation survey. So likewise, how we defined external cordon line, we have to consider each and every type of land use will be divided into the different zone. Industrial as a one land use pattern, as a one zone; residential as a one other zone. So as I already mentioned it. And next is the zone should be of homogeneous land use, and we need to consider anticipated changes in the land use that should also be considered. So when we consider residential area, so in the future that residential area may get converted into the commercial establishment, or the industrial sector may completely get closed, and that may get created into the some other land use pattern may changes. So likewise in future, if any land use pattern is going to change, that also need to be considered while dividing the area into the zone. And when we make the zones into the subzone, that subdivision should follow the closely that adopted by the other bodies for the data collection. So which will helps in the correlations of the data. Mainly we will take the electoral polls, the zoning which is done on electoral polls, that will be considered. And the zones should neither be too large. So if the zones are too large, the chances of errors will be more. And also it should not be very the zone should have a preferably some geometric shape should have. It should follow some of the rectangular pattern, circular pattern, so that will be easy for us for the data collection. And when we have as divide the area into the sector, that should represent the catchment of trip generated. So when we divide the sector, it should include all the each and every point from where the journey will start or the trip is being generated. So that's what we can say, the sector should represent the catchment of the study area which has been generated. And the zones which be compatible with the screen lines and the cordon lines. Cordon lines are nothing but when we divide it into area into the various zones, we have the lines which will represent the line, outer line which will represent the study area, that's an external cordon line, and those line in which the study area is divided into subdivision. So these lines we call it as the internal cordon line. And the screen lines are the one to check the accuracy of the data. We will have the check lines that we call it as the screen lines. So when we divide the area into the subzones and the zones, it should be compatible with such screen lines and the cordon lines. And when we make the zone boundaries, it should have a preferably the watershed of trip making. That's nothing but the catchment area of the trip making. Any natural or the physical barriers such as the canal, rivers, etc. can form a convenient zone boundary. And also there must be a number of internal cordon line arranged as a concentric lines to check the accuracy of the survey data. So as I already mentioned, screen lines or the lines which runs through the study area which to check the accuracy of the data collected, and it is located along the physical or natural barriers like rivers, railway lines, canals, etc. So with this I'll conclude the session, and some of the key points which will be frequently asked in the examination, which includes they'll ask define the study area and define the external cordon line, the factors considered in the external cordon line. That's an important question. And secondly, you may get the questions from how the coding practicing will be done while dividing the area into the zones. Along with that, they'll ask some of the points that to be keep it in mind when dividing the area into the zone. So these are the most frequently asked questions. So please make a note on this. In the next session, we will study on the various transportation surveys will be used to collect the information which is required for the transportation planning. Thank you.